In the beginning, there was the Great Mother, the Earth, the mother of gods and men, of all life, the female principle of nature, the symbol of eternal rebirth. From its womb springs water, the source of life. The earth feeds us, and the land clothes us. The relationship between man and earth with the Great Mother is actually an ancient magic. There are people who understand and are the true guardians of knowledge. Call them what you will: priests, wizards, druids, mediums, psychics, witches. There are more: mummers and babugeri, stančinari, dervishes, elders, surat, jamalari, brazai, all mages of a sort, all kukers. The name does not matter. They are people who feel the places with strong magic. And from ancient times until today, they have established their sanctuaries, their cities, their temples, shrines, and altars in those places. Whether it is a sacrifice to a Dionysian mystery or some other ritual, the point is the same: to reaffirm the relationship of masculinity, the magician or druid, with the feminine, the Great Mother. Today, there are not many places on the planet where magic is strong and tradition alive. One of those which remains is Yambol. Zajci Vrch. It is located about 7 kilometers from the modern city of Yambol. It is the easternmost peak of a small mountain, the Middle Forest, and the younger sister of the Balkan Mountains, hence the name of the Balkan Peninsula. Zajci Vrch has been a sanctuary since antiquity, a part of the Great Mother, Kabyle, Hecate, Artemis, or Magna Mater. These are all different names for the same goddess. The monolithic rock on top is carved into a cross whose shoulders perfectly show the 4 cardinal directions: north, east, south, and west. Who, when, and how this site was created, we do not know, and will most likely never know. The creation of this sanctuary is an ancient cryptic puzzle. It is obvious that the site was not only a temple. It is a kind of compass which was used as an observatory. It is believed that the ancient priests here observed the movement of celestial bodies and calculated their solstices. This set the calendar, and when various agricultural activities should be performed, such as plowing, harvesting, and sowing the seeds. To ordinary people, it all seemed like magic, and it probably was described as magic. But actually, everything was an orderly system of astronomical knowledge. Where and how people in that distant era have acquired this knowledge, we can only guess. The sanctuary is a miniature version of the famous continental Stonehenge. Its purpose is the same: part magical focus, part astronomical tool. The Second Millennium Bc. As usually happened in antiquity, around this shrine arose an ancient city, Kabyle. This place was not chosen by chance. Besides sacred glory, the conditions here were very suitable for life. The nearby river Tunja, called in antiquity Tonzos, flows strongly. Kabyle was inhabited by Thracians, the ancient people who coexisted for millennia with the Greeks and later the Romans. People who have left a rich cultural heritage. The Thracians, who were described as fearless warriors in Homer's Iliad. They had no alphabet, and therefore information about them is scarce. But the Thracians were amazing people. They appeared out of nowhere. They were an incredibly complex civilization with a profound philosophy of life and death. They regarded death as birth, and death the beginning of life. So they cried at births and at funeral feasts. The main sources of information about these amazing people are indirect, mostly archaeological finds where ancient Greek authors described them. And sometimes there are signs like this, in ancient Greek. The inscription was found in Sevtopolis, another important Thracian town since the ancient times. The text is actually something like an international treaty governing relations between the rulers of Sevtopolis and Kabyle. A curious fact is that in the history of Kabyle is that the local rulers were the first to use for themselves the title of Tsar. And they do this with enviable confidence, suggesting that they were not impostors and that their title was recognized internationally. Kabyle emerged as a major center of what is now the geographical area Thrace, the lands between the Balkan and Rhodope mountains. The city was mentioned for the first time in the 4th century BC in one of the famous diatribes of the Athenian orator Demosthenes. His passionate speeches against the Macedonian king Philip II, the father of Alexander the Great. Philip himself subsequently seized Kabyle and made it part of the Macedonian state, the giant Macedonian Empire. After the death of his son Alexander, when the empire disintegrated, Kabyle regained its independence. That's when the city was ruled by Spartok and Skostok, rulers who were proclaimed Tsars. Kabyle was a huge area at the time, over 280 acres, surrounded by a massive wall. The city was built by the rules of Hellenistic construction, with baths, temples, and agora. Typical of the ancient city is the presence of many public buildings, as institutions and buildings that are used by all. Besides being a royal city, Kabyle was a financial center. The city had well-developed metalworking and a foundry. Therefore, Kabyle had a mint, a workshop for making coins. It was like the Federal Reserve of the ancient world. Kabyle is the only city in the interior of Thrace who minted their own coins. Moreover, the city mint produced coins for many foreign cities and rulers. All of them were stamped with a sign of quality, the local emblem of the city, Artemis. Sometimes, they even on foreign coins placed the stamp of Artemis, meaning the coins were validated, verified, and guaranteed by the city of Kabyle. Samples of such coins have been found, both in the city and in neighboring towns. In ancient Kabyle, the first Thracian coins were minted with the image of a live, real person, Spartok. These coins were the first among the Thracian rulers who called themselves Tsar. After the glamorous royal period at the beginning of the 3rd century BC, Kabyle obviously chose democracy and began to manage itself under the model of an ancient Greek polis, with citizens. This was a period of economic boom for the city. Kabyle had become a major commercial center. Among the finds from that period abound amphorae stamped with the name of the city, a brand of origin and quality. Pottery marks the city's heyday, merchants abounded, and household objects were much more prevalent. Some of them are not quite decent, as this lamp, for example, which depicts a scene of explicit homosexual intercourse between men. But in this highly commercial, mercantile period of dissipation and delay, the Thracians did not forget their relationship with magic. During this period, Kabyle and the Thracians were briefly conquered by the Celts, northern tribes who inhabited the territory of present-day France and Britain. To the Celts is attributed the construction of the legendary Stonehenge. Their priests, called druids, most likely also used the sanctuary, the observatory of Zaitchivruch. The Celts ruled the area for approximately 70 years, but the interpenetration of the two cultures is a fact. Druids are one of the most enigmatic types of mystics of antiquity. People rediscover their heritage today in magic rituals as mages or Kukers. Ancient sources describe the mystical rites of the Thracians and the Druids. They were all connected with the sunrise, with the symbolic birth of the sun. Priests knew that sunrise must catch the dedicated prepared, so they gathered at the holy place by night. With prayers and ritual dances, they magically awakened the Great Mother, the source of living magic who helps the sun to be born. When this happens, when they met first light, when the light shone on the shrine, the priests believed that they fulfilled their mission, They acted with the proper conduct to begin another magical cycle, the Wheel of the Year. From that era remained one of the three magical instruments of the ancient Thracians, the kabyle. The other two, the lyre and the panpipe, today continue to exist as a piano and an organ, but the kabyle, the flute of ancient gods and priests, passed through the centuries almost unchanged. The simple wooden flute is actually a connection between worlds, between living magic and everyday life, between the real world and the hereafter, between the divine and the human. Most historians believe that the kabyle is the oldest musical instrument, and the fact that it has passed so many millennia unchanged is perhaps evidence of its magical origin. After rejecting the authority of the Celts, the Thracians had to face a new threat: Rome. Kabyle and the other Thracian towns along the Tundra managed to preserve their independence for 150 years, but finally were broken by the ruthless Roman legions. Kabyle and the area around it became a part of the Roman province of Thrace, and the city was turned into a military camp. The nearby river and springs made the city a perfect place where Roman legionnaires could relax and heal their wounded between periods of fighting on the borders of the empire. The active presence and participation of the army in city life is evidenced by numerous finds of votive tablets, like pagan stone icons, with images of the horseman. The horseman is an ancient Thracian deity. At the end of the 2nd century AD, Roman emperors of the Severan dynasty, and those who followed them, the so-called soldier emperors, tried to impose throughout the empire a single cult, the cult of the horseman. This was a direct transposition from the Thracian pantheon. We know the emperors failed, but the fact that the deity chosen for the new cult was a Thracian sacred figure speaks to the complex mystical and magical interaction between Rome and Thrace. In that era, medicine was also a sacred magical activity. Kabyle traditionally practiced advanced medicine. A respect and reverence for the magic practitioners of the medical profession is shown in temples and statues dedicated to the patron gods of physicians, Asclepius and Hygeia. But even magic was not able to stop the passage of time. The old gods slowly died and gave way to the new religion, Christianity. The importance and significance of the Kabyle was the fact that at the outset of the establishment of Christianity, the city was a bishop center. One interesting feature of the city is that there have been found the remains of the second largest Christian basilica in the territory of modern Bulgaria. The ruins are impressive. The basilica was one of the largest and lavish churches at the time. The floor was paved with beautiful mosaics, the details of which are well preserved. Basilica Kabyle was greater than Sophia's St. Sophia, the temple in which 343 was held the Council of Serdica. This meeting approved the first version of the creed, and from this decision burst forth a mighty clash between the rational supporters of the Alexandrian bishop Athanasius and the followers of Arius, the Christian mystic. The Arians were defeated, but in the annals of the town, there is evidence that the bishop of Kabyle was also actively involved in the conflict. Of course, he was on the side of Arius. The mystical magical school of Kabyle did not disappear with the death of the pagan gods. The splendid ancient city of Kabyle did not experience the early Middle Ages. It was attacked several times during the Great Migration in the late 4th century, and the city was conquered by the Goths. It was destroyed, burned, and broken later by the Avars. It was never restored. On the site of the ruins was raised a slightly medieval settlement which existed until the middle of the second millennium after Christ. It seemed as if the spirit of magic was broken, but no. The traditional relationship with the earth, the Great Mother, was saved. It just moved a few kilometers down the valley of the river Tunja. Several centuries before the invading Goths and Avars, and then at the end of the 3rd century, in the valley of Tunja, passed the Roman Emperor Diocletian. He was one of the most powerful rulers of the late Roman Empire, a cruel and harsh man, but definitely held agricultural knowledge. History tells us that after his voluntary abdication, he retired to the Adriatic coast and organized a model farm. Diocletian so liked the land along the Tunja and the soil fertility of the area near the little insignificant village near which he regularly passed, he ordered a city built there. He called it Diospolis, the city of God. This city occupied a strategic location in medieval Thrace. It constantly changed hands, being Byzantine, Bulgarian, Latin, and then Byzantine again. Of particular importance was its strategic location, at the crossroads of western Thrace and the Black Sea, and on the road to Adrianople and Constantinople. In Diospolis passed the connection between the Greek colonies of Sozopol, Niceber, and Callias and their mother country. These ancient cities were part of the Byzantine port zone around the Black Sea. Thanks to them, the Byzantine Empire was able to control both the military ambitions of neighboring countries and trade in the region. Sozopol and Niceber were the economic and military back to Constantinople. The road to there passes through Diospolis. Perhaps that is why this city, Diospolis, and later Yambol, inherited devastated Kabyle's spirit. Medieval Yambol preserved magical traditions from antiquity. There are a few other evidences of city life, but the preserved ones are very informative. See here this lion's head, for example. Its religious purpose is without question, despite the claims of some that it was only an architectural element. Only one was found, a unique item. If it was just decoration, there would have been dozens of similar items. The lion of the columns bears striking similarities to images from the Preceptorius of the Knights Templar. These knights held the most mystical and secret knowledge attached to the order during the Middle Ages. It is entirely possible that the stone lion was part of their magic rituals banned from the official church. Throughout the Middle Ages, Christian Yambol was a mighty military fortress. During the Ottoman invasion of the Balkans, it was one of the first places of resistance to meet the conquerors. After the successful campaign of the Turks marched on to Vienna, Yambol lost its strategic military importance, but remained an important economic center of Thrace. The Ottomans also left their spiritual mark on the town. From this period remains the Eski Mosque, or Old Mosque, built in the 14th century, and the Bazaar. Both buildings were built in the style typical of the era Islamic architecture. The purpose of this mosque is clear. It is a Muslim prayer temple. A bezistene represented a covered market, which in the tradition of Islamic culture, besides a commercial center, was also a place of communication. Also, similar buildings in the Islamic world generally operated inns that housed merchants and also itinerant preachers. There stayed dervishes, Muslim ascetics whose mystical spirit and strange religious practices left a mark on the local population. Not surprisingly, the word dervish is synonymous with Kuker. Across the world, there are many religions and customs where the participants put on masks. Their motives are varied, mostly for fun or as a form of theater. Some have become world famous, such as the carnivals of Venice and Rio de Janeiro, or Japanese theater. The Venetian carnival masked flirting, allowing the possibility of cheating, coquetry, and a brief escape from the strict rules of the medieval morality. In the region of Yambol and Kabyle, however, putting on the masks is a continuation of an ancient magical tradition. Generally, in Venice and Rio, there is a specific time when people dress up, for Shrove, in the early days of Lent, preceding the feast of Christ's resurrection, usually sometime in late February or early March. But the time should not be confused as a recent event. The roots of these customs predate the advent of Christianity by millennia. Even in ancient times, people marked the beginning of spring, performed magic rituals, secret ceremonies, and cast arcane spells which were recited to reaffirm man's relationship to the Great Mother. The days of these festivals were not chosen randomly. They were a direct result of astronomical observations of ancient priests, of Zajcivruk or Stonehenge. In recent years in Yambol, this ancient tradition has been revived. Mages, Kaush, Babugeri, Stancinari, dervishes, elders, Surat, Jamalari, Brazai, Kukers. In other words, modern priests of ancient magic from Bulgaria and abroad come together at the international festival Kukerlandia. Their combined forces feed live magic that annually renews the earth after winter. The festival is colorful and well attended, but underpinned by local Yambol Kukers who have preserved ancient traditions. On the day of the feast, called Kukov Day, they earnestly and consistently fulfill the requirements of the ritual. The Kukers involved are only men, although some of them, such as the bride, wear female costumes. Fighting evil is an entirely male obligation. In many places, the only men able to be involved were single men, men who had no families. There is a strong belief that communication with magic is something dangerous. Amongst the most important items for the Kukers are masks and costumes. Made by ancient rules, each element has its place, and arbitrariness is not frowned upon. Most masks are made of wood with a pointed shape, on which is glued leather or fabric. They are decorated with colorful ribbons, rags, sequins, and have a long, colorful cape jutting forward in the front. The aim of the mask is to be as colorful and ugly as possible to scare and repel evil spirits. Some of the masks were made with two faces, one ugly and scary, and the other with a snub nose and a kindly expression. In the Roman pantheon, any ambidextrous god, for example Janus, who we know was worshipped in the Middle Eastern territories of the empire, was an important character in the Dionysian mysteries, further evidence of the practice of ancient magic rituals. Kukers dressed very diversely, with male and female clothing. Amongst them stands the figure of the bride, a young man without a mask, wearing the clothes of a married woman. The bride wears plenty of beads, coins, and other treasures, which are a kind of amulet which engenders fertility. During the celebration, the Kukers are almost constantly bouncing and moving, and the bells issue an unimaginable noise. The target is to combine with the mask to frighten evil spirits. Kukers go out early in the morning, well before dawn. They hide outside the village to put on their costumes. The bride even goes to the home of a woman whose clothes he wears and dresses there. When the mages are prepared to go to the bride, they pretend that it has been a long time coming, and from far away. Once it is dawn, the tour of the town is started. The group moves from house to house, making noise. The tour and the noise go together. Sometimes the noise is so loud that farmers who have animals try to take them out to pasture until the Kukers are far away, because the effect of these mages' costumed appearance stresses the cattle. In some places, the evening after the ritual, a large fire was kindled, and the Kukers leapt over it. And when they departed, they threw their masks into the fire to burn. In other places, after the tour, the bride and the Kukers went to the field, where they simulated a ritual pregnancy and rebirth. The magic rituals of the mages have a single purpose: to ward off evil forces and to establish man's place in the global web as a partner of the Great Mother. As if to enhance the role of Yambol in the global web, fate ruled that the city become the birthplace of one of the greatest artists of the 20th century, George Papazov. Born in 1894 in a family with many generations of priests, George Papazov was a natural talent. His education was simple. He studied landscape architecture in Prague, entering the school using a fake high school diploma. He knew in-depth literature and philosophy, but spontaneously began to become interested in painting. After a few years spent living in Prague, Vienna, Berlin, Geneva, and Paris, he became an outstanding representative of the global vanguard, picturesque. He participated in exhibitions with Picasso, Miro, Masson Darin, and other great artists. They labeled Papazov as a surrealist, but Georges himself did not join the manifesto of the surrealists. The French critic Jean Crespet says of him, "He was a surrealist before surrealists became surrealists." The extreme surrealists began to annoy Papazov, and after their initial closeness, he distanced himself from them. By the end of his life, which was spent mostly in France, he emphasized that he was Bulgarian and was proud of it. He so much idealized and exaggerated his homeland that his friend, the famous writer Marcel Aimé, said of him, "Papazov is a true son of this strange and attractive Bulgaria, where people usually live 140 years and where it is not uncommon to see a 4-year-old child kill an ox with his fist." At the beginning, his paintings were fairly trivial, sweet watercolor landscapes. Gradually, however, they became more abstract and complex to solve. His first critics called it barbaric. Bioforms and geometric shapes dominated, which amazingly resembled the ascetics of the Kukers' masks, with their sharp edges and elongated forms. There are great similarities in color and form between the works of Papazov and the Kukers. They are all bright and colorful. Maybe in the subconscious of the great artist lived the memory of ancient magic that only needed a medium to appear. Papazov himself was not into some complex philosophical justification of his works. "A painting cannot speak. A painting has to do it and shut up," he said. Thus, perhaps without even knowing, he hearkened back to the legacy of the Hesekarists, a medieval Orthodox sect that teaches that union with God is achieved through silence. There are reports that in Yambol, the Hesekaristic school was particularly strong, and no wonder that the priestly origin of Papazov and this ancient tradition showed in his works. A year after the death of the artist in 1972, in Brussels, was published a monograph of his work entitled Papazov, the Wild Shooter of Surrealism. But besides being a spiritual and magical center, over the centuries Yambol has had another important role, as a military center. Thracian fortifications, a Roman camp, the Yambol fortress. This history of the military deserves respect. Today in Yambol operates one of the few museums in Bulgaria of combat glory. It has in it unique specimens of modern weaponry from the 20th century. For example, the cutter tool Krupp Ryuzon, used during the First World War. In the world, only 2 remain. One is here. Another valuable piece is the anti-tank gun Jagdpanzer L-48, a military trophy of the Bulgarian army from World War II. Worldwide, there are no more than 7 or 8 left. Amongst the valuable exhibits also include a German assault gun, Sturmgeschütz 3G, and the Panzer IV tank. On the ground are 3 military planes, and in the museum are various examples of Russian and German small arms, and various orders and medals. The war was also magic, evil magic, and mystical weapons that had power over life and death. Life and death are the foundation of every philosophy, every ritual. But ancient magic blends them together into the miracle of rebirth. Mages, ancient magicians, and priests liaised with the beyond to keep harmony and to ensure a cyclical course of time. This is actually magic. The calendar of modern man is linear for us. Yesterday, today, tomorrow, and time flows in one direction and never changes. For the ancient magic of the mages, time was a circle. Tomorrow is both tomorrow and yesterday. Today will be again tomorrow. It is this philosophy that is woven into Kukeri rituals. They are ancient. It proves their concept of a cycle. The calendar is a circle, a dance. Life is a circle. Death is not the end, but the beginning, the rebirth of meaning. Kukeri wizards from Kabyle, Diospolis, and Yambol have preserved this knowledge and keep it even today. Because without them, the passage of time becomes irreversible, life temporary, and death eternal. Because the Kukers are the keepers of the knowledge of rebirth, they keep the old magic alive.